So we welcome back to the show Senator Tom Cotton of the great state of Arkansas. Senator Cotton, thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. It's always good to be back on with you.
So listen, this crazy semiconductor chip, $250 billion bailout, Senator Schumer's trap. I just want you to listen to what your colleague Rick Scott said on Fox Business yesterday, because I think it sums up everything. Please take a listen.
Intel Corporation made $20 billion last year. Guess what? We're going to give them some money to build a plant. Then we're going to give them a tax deduction for building the plant. And then we're going to give them a tax credit for building the plant. And guess what? They can keep doing business in China.
So, I hate to be too simplistic, but I think that kind of sums up the craziness of this bill. What you voted against the procedural vote, which was a fabulous vote on your part, if I do say so. What do you think of this story?
Yes, so Larry, there is a genuine risk of China controlling the world's chip market, especially the most advanced chips which are made in Taiwan. I just don't think this bill has enough guardrails, for instance, whether it's allowing companies that might benefit from these tax credits or grants to continue to do business in China. I don't think there's enough protections for the money that would be going to America's universities and colleges and the National Science Foundation to make sure that they're not subject of Chinese espionage. And finally, also worry that it may not be addressing that one very specific, very critical threat, which is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They make the world's most advanced chips. They're on an island that China has targeted with thousands of missiles and probably intends to invade in the next few years if we don't do something to stop it. It's most vital that we focus on those chips and making sure that we get them out of Taiwan in part so there's resiliency in their production, preferably to America, but at least out of missile range from mainland China.
I want to digress. I want to come back to the chip story in a second. But on this business of Taiwan, where I think you're absolutely right about the Chinese threat. In fact, you read in the newspapers, they're watching Russia's mistakes in Ukraine so that they can be better prepared to go into Taiwan. The U.S. government, the Biden administration, doesn't seem to be doing anything really to provide arms and expertise to the Taiwan government, whether it's air defenses or naval defenses or whatever. We won't be able to do it if they invade because they're just an island, as you said. What is Biden doing on this point?
He's not doing nearly enough, Larry. As you said, we got to get those weapons to Taiwan now because unlike Ukraine, since Taiwan's an island, China could blockade Taiwan and we wouldn't be able to resupply them. And we need to get the right kinds of weapons to Taiwan. Look, we're not going to be able to produce enough aircraft, enough ships for Taiwan. We can produce things like anti-ship missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, advanced sea mines, the kinds of weapons for land warfare in Ukraine that stopped Russia's invasion in the north in March. We could give them the same kind of weapons that would stop a maritime and an air invasion of Taiwan. But we need to produce a lot more of it right here in America, and we need to make sure that we're getting it to Taiwan as fast as we can.
Do the Bidens get that there's a major threat with respect to China invading Taiwan? I mean, do they get that?
Joe Biden can't even get America's policy straight, Larry. For decades, we've had a policy of what's called strategic ambiguity. We won't say exactly what we will do if China invades Taiwan. Now, I, for one, think that policy is now outdated, that we should be clear that we will help Taiwan defend itself. Joe Biden in the last 9 months has said the same thing 3 times, only to have his own staff walk it back within a few hours. That creates the worst of both worlds. We have the provocation of China without the deterrence of China.
Let me just come back to this chip story. $250 billion. I don't think anybody knows exactly what's in the Schumer Amendment yet. It's over 1,000 pages. But I got a couple things. Besides the $25 billion in tax credits and the $54 billion in grants, Senator, I see transportation gets $10 billion. National Science Foundation doubles their budget, $82 billion. The Commerce Department gets $11 billion. The Energy Department, get this, the Energy Department gets $50 billion. This sounds like Solyndra all over again. I got these numbers from Steve Scalise's office. I don't have all of them, but I get to $234 billion. I mean, really, do we have to have a big spending inflationary bill just to take care of what amounts to some national security issues?
No, Larry, I don't think so. And let me give you one example. The National Science Foundation budget more than doubling. They've done good work in the past, but they're a small grant-making institution. What they aren't that great at is ensuring that their grant recipients at college and university labs around the country are not the victims of Chinese espionage. In fact, they and those universities and the companies that work with them often actively oppose any measures to protect their innovations and inventions from Chinese espionage. I really worry that we're going to be shoving money in the front door of some of these institutions, and China is going to be taking their breakthroughs out the back door back to China.
And won't all these appropriations or grants have the usual left-wing strings attached to them? You know, we're going to have racial justice and equity and Green New Deal, climate change. I mean, isn't that going to be part of this mess?
I think you can assume the Biden administration is going to be making sure that all of their left-wing itches get scratched anytime they're sending money out the door. That's why we shouldn't be giving them a lot more money.
All right, well, spot on that. Can I just move the ball to the energy story, the radical climate activism of the administration? So Biden yesterday didn't have a whole lot to say. He didn't make any major announcements. It was mostly small beer. But I just want to ask you, because I know you've spoken out on this. After the Supreme Court decision, West Virginia versus the EPA, that says regulators can't move in any major way to affect the economy unless Congress absolutely stipulates with statutory legislation. Do you think President Biden is going to go for emergency powers for climate change, for Defense Production Act for climate change, which would violate A, congressional laws, and B, the Constitution? I mean, do you think he'll declare war on the Supreme Court?
Well, I hope not. He shouldn't, and he doesn't have that power. But he's already declared war on the fossil fuel industry. Now, you're right, Larry, that the Supreme Court decision in the EPA case has reined in some of these bureaucratic agencies. It may take more court fights for them to get the picture. But every time Joe Biden has a press conference like he did yesterday, every time he says we're going to end fossil fuels, we're not going to have any more drilling, we're not going to have any more production of oil and gas and coal in this country, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy because Americans are not going to put their hard-earned savings into those industries. And then you top that off with all of his pals on Wall Street, people like Larry Fink, who are trying to target fossil fuel producers or users by keeping them out of the capital markets. It just makes it that much harder for these companies to get the investments they need to continue to explore and produce more oil and gas and coal for our economy.
Yeah, I think that's been the problem from almost day one. Let me go another direction in the Middle East. I am utterly baffled. I mean, I do not understand this. You're a foreign policy expert. I'm not. To me, a nuclear deal with Iran would have catastrophic consequences. And yet, when he was over there in the Middle East, in Riyadh, for example, the president repeatedly said, quote, I've put a deal on the table for Iran, and it's not going to be there forever. Sounds to me like if Iran would say yes, the deal would go through. Among other things, the deal might be worth $1 trillion to Iran. I mean, how in the world can we be contemplating a deal with a cutthroat country like Iran?
You know, Joe Biden is and always has been what Ronald Reagan's UN ambassador, the great Gene Kirkpatrick, called a blame America first Democrat. Joe Biden and Barack Obama and so many other Democrats always blame America first. And they blame America for having tense relations with Iran. That's one reason why Barack Obama wanted this deal in the first place. People criticize him for getting a weak deal. Said, why didn't he get a better deal? Larry, the answer is he didn't want a better deal. He wanted America to pull in its horns for its supposed sins and to atone, in particular, towards Iran. That's why he gave them such a great deal. And then he thought that would enable the United States to withdraw entirely from the Middle East because you'd have Iran and all of its proxies balanced off against Israel and the Arab nations. That obviously was a failure. And what succeeded in the Trump era was closely supporting our friends, pro-American countries like Israel and so many Arab nations, not trying to mollify and coddle the anti-American ayatollahs in Iran. It fails every time.
I mean, is there any evidence, looking at the history of these so-called deals, starting with Obama, of course, Trump pulled out and slapped sanctions on him. Is there any evidence that any deal would be verified, would be properly investigated. In other words, to me, Senator Cotton, Iran lies, cheats, steals, murders, et cetera, I don't feel like giving them $1 trillion, and I don't feel like trusting them in any way, shape, or form. They're enriching uranium. You know it. I know it. They're close to a bomb. I mean, I just don't get this, really. Step back. I don't get it. What's the evidence that Iran could be ever believed?
There's not much evidence at all, Larry, and there's not much evidence that these kinds of deals work. Remember, it didn't work when Bill Clinton entered this deal with North Korea in 1994. They were cheating on it from the very first day, and within 12 years, they had the bomb. Or look what happened with Iraq's nuclear weapons program in the late 1970s, early 1980s. It wasn't an arms control agreement that ended it. It was Israeli fighter jets bombing it. Same thing with a reactor that was being built in Syria in 2007. Again, what these outlaw regimes understand is military strength. They don't appreciate weakness. They take advantage of it.
Last question, sir. Is my very dear friend Sarah Sanders going to be the next governor of Arkansas?
She's not going to be the next governor of Arkansas. She's going to be the next fantastic governor of Arkansas, Larry. So, of course, she's going to win, and we're very excited to have Sarah Sanders as our next governor.
Thank you, sir. Senator Tom Cotton, we appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Larry.
You bet.